Well, it may seem a little bit harder and harder to get into the Christmas spirit this year because each time you turn on the TV, we're telling you about that fiscal cliff and how close we are getting to it. It's especially true if you're in the process of trying to sell a house right now. What is being proposed in the negotiations? How does it affect the real estate market? To talk with us about that today, Wink News real estate expert Denny Grimes is in with us this morning, and this does have direct impact, some of these negotiations going on related to our housing market.
Yeah, although the negotiations are kind of going on behind closed doors, there are talking about eliminating or changing the interest deduction. This is not new. They proposed it before, and it's going to have an effect on folks.
So if we change the mortgage interest deduction as it's been perhaps described or at least reported, what does that mean? What do you see?
Well, first of all, I brought a slide to let people know, for the non-accountants out there, and I'm not an accounting major, that how it really works. Okay, so it's not a tax credit, it's a deduction. So for example, if somebody had a $200,000 mortgage at 4.5% interest and they were in a 25% tax bracket, their savings would be roughly about $200 a month off their payment.
Right. And
so that means if two homes side by side would be, somebody's renting and paying $1,000 a month, the identical home next door, and the homeowners own it and their payment's $1,000 a month. In essence, the government is basically giving them a tax break, so their payment in essence is $800 a month because of the tax tax savings.
Right.
And so right now the law states that you can get up to $1 million if you have $1 million worth of mortgages. You can write off interest up to about that much.
Right, and for most people that's probably the largest deduction they take every year when they fill out the tax forms is that mortgage deduction.
That's right.
But what happens? What's being talked about here that could have our impact?
Well, two things. One is they're talking about curtailing the interest deduction and eliminating it from $1 million down to $500,000. Still, that's still the bulk of the folks here in our market. Most of that sales and homeowners are below $500,000. So that's not going to be the biggest issue. The biggest issue is that they're talking about eliminating the mortgage interest deduction for second homes and for equity loans. And a lot of times people use an equity loan up north to buy something down here. And so we're a big second home market, and what that could mean is, if you use the same example, if somebody has a $250,000 condo or home here, which is very typical,
right,
and they have a $200,000 mortgage, if you eliminate that deduction, the cost of that property is about $230 more a month. And so now the rent versus own, rent versus buy decision becomes like, you know, maybe if we're going to be there part-time, the extra, you don't get the tax advantage. Now maybe they choose to rent instead of buy or own, and what that does, it makes puts downward pressure on housing demand, downward pressure on prices. There's fewer builders working, so it actually it could have a potential of slowing the economy. So, you know, there's some momentum now on basically attacking the rich. I call it a rich hunt. And so don't be surprised if you don't see some form of this coming out in some proposal where it's going to be curtailed.
Right, yeah, I think the average homeowner looks at the mortgage interest deduction, doesn't worry because they're probably not impacted. But the second homeowner, you're right. I mean, that could make a big difference. You want the deduction to buy the second house. If you don't get it, you don't buy it.
That's right, and that would have tremendous trickle-down effects for us.
Yeah, it certainly will in our market, and we need all the help we can still get, Denny.
You bet.
All right, if you have questions for Denny, you can always email him at denny@dennygrimes.com. We'll come right back. Top stories, weather, and traffic are after this. Stay with us.